All right, thank you. So Retta, the title of her talk was How Effective is Targeted Cattle Grazing? And what I'm going to talk today about is keys to making targeted cattle grazing more effective. And we're going to be using, amongst a lot of other trials, some of Retta's data in her cows, along with some conducted in other areas. So the objective of what we're trying to do is to evaluate effective strategies using low moisture block protein supplement and low stress herding to target cattle grazing on various rangelands. And as Retta showed, she was very successful in her targeting of her cattle around the supplement and in her targeted plots. But there were some of our other trials we weren't quite as successful. And so we're looking at some of the differences and why some were successful and why some were less successful. And so the main question we were asking is, how can time spent targeting cattle grazing be more effective? This comes in as an expense and also not only in cost, but as expense of time. So to be the most effective in targeting cattle grazing, it would be the most beneficial. And so, and like I said, we're mainly looking at low moisture block protein supplement and herding to target cattle grazing. And so as I said, data for these targeted grazing studies has been collected in several different research trials. It started in Montana and then also in New Mexico and what Retta talked about in Arizona. And so initially, research began in Montana looking at the effectiveness of using low moisture block protein supplement and herding to reduce time cattle spent on riparian areas and to get cattle to use uplands in greater abundance. From that data and from the results from there, we decided we want to see if we can target cattle grazing using low moisture block protein supplement and herding for ecosystem services and also to alter distribution. And so that instigated research conducted in Corona, New Mexico, in central New Mexico, and that's on short grass prairie region in New Mexico. We've also done trials on mountain rangelands near Mayhill, New Mexico, in the Sacramento Mountains. We're currently doing a trial on Chihuahuan Desert rangeland just north of Las Cruces, New Mexico, and then Retta's study there south of Tucson, Arizona. So we had quite a diversity of rangelands, as I said, a lot of different sizes of pastures, but most of the pastures were very large, some as many as several thousand hectares. And generally, there was between 22 in our smallest herd and close to 200 in the largest herd that we conducted trials with. And generally, targeted grazing trial periods lasted between 5 and 10 days, and cattle were gathered at water and herded to the targeted locations where low moisture block protein supplement was placed. Within these herds, 4 to 10 of the cows had GPS collars on them, and they were tracked at 10-minute intervals between these. And so, as I said before, like what we are looking for is the keys to effective targeted cattle grazing that we've seen over all these different trials that we were able to conduct. And the first thing we found is that placement of low moisture block protein supplement was an important component of making sure that targeted cattle grazing was effective. And this came from research conducted in Montana, and this study's been brought up a few times here today. But what they're looking at is if herding and then also a treatment of herding and supplement could decrease utilization on riparian areas. And what they found was that when supplement was available, forage utilization within 600 meters of the targeted area, or 600 meters of the supplement, was greater than when no supplement was available, either with herding or within a control, as this figure shows here. And so what was found was that strategic placement of supplement appeared to help hold cattle within a targeted area better than just herding alone. So cattle would stay there, they would tend to graze around where the supplement was located, and do that better than when just herding alone or a controlled period. Also, what was found in the analysis was that upland utilization tended to, as distance from water increased, forage utilization would decrease, which is typical, is what we would expect to find in those situations as you get farther away from water. However, when low moisture block protein supplement was provided and herded, forage utilization did not decline with increasing distance from water, which is somewhat of an unusual observation and shows that there was more uniformity in grazing in this area using the herding and low moisture block protein supplement. The second key that we found to targeted cattle grazing is choosing the proper season to target cattle grazing. And this is mostly involved when there is dormant vegetation. And one of the main things we found in studying this is that low moisture block intake per day is closely related to the hours of day they spent within the target. This figure shows within 250 meters of supplement, and this is just studies in New Mexico and Arizona. And so what we found is that if cattle intake was about 0.3 kilograms per day, cattle would spend approximately 9.3 hours per day within 250 meters of the supplement. And when it was less than that, we had far less success. And what we found was that during these times, one of the trials, is conducted in June and on into July, and we got some rains, and so half of the study was in very dry forage, and it worked very well. The rains came, forage was actively growing. The intake of the low moisture block protein supplement dropped off, which would be expected because of the higher quality of the forage. And in another few that we had, it just appeared that the cattle didn't like the low moisture block protein supplement that was provided. And so that's also an important component, is making sure your cattle are liking the supplement. It's expensive, and you have it there for a purpose, and you want them to eat it. Which also makes sense in terms of grazing on dormant forage, is that there is a need for that protein supplement. To further illustrate this point, this was a trial conducted near Las Cruces, New Mexico on desert rangeland in December of 2011. And as you can see, the crude protein levels were 3.7%. It was on dormant forage, so relatively low quality forage. Supplement intake during this trial was about 0.52 kilograms per day. And this is generally right where the supplement provider, their recommended intake levels. During this time, cattle spent about 12.7 hours per day. We had 5 GPS collared animals in a herd of 42. And so they spent a lot of time in the targeted area. In contrast, in Mayhill, New Mexico, and this is on mountain range, they had some early rains, and the forage was actively growing. Crude protein levels about 6.2%. The cattle, this location, I'll show more about this in a minute. This was about, let's see, it was about 300 feet above the valley floor here, and so it was relatively, it was short distance to the valley floor, but it was a relatively high vertical climb. But supplement intake was about 1.5 kilograms per day, so they didn't eat the supplement, and they didn't spend a whole lot of time within the targeted grazing plot. However, this is the same targeted plot here that was in the mountain rangeland in Mayhill, New Mexico. And what we found is that we were able to see a big difference in where the cattle grazed, even though they didn't eat the supplement and they didn't stay within our targeted plot. So within this upper valley, this is when they were turned out, and this is for 9 days. This was only 22 head, but we had 5 with GPS collars. In this, when they were very first turned out and they were free roaming, cattle spent between 60 and 70% of their time within this upper valley, and the rest of the time here. But most of their watering was done at this water, and they spent 0 time. And from our assessment of vegetation in these areas were very lightly grazed, if ever grazed at all. However, after we started herding and providing low moisture block protein supplement, they spent less than 10% of their time in this upper valley, and majority of their time in this lower valley. And they even spent about 4 hours per day on the ridgetop surrounding the targeted plot, just only about an hour per day within the targeted plot. So it was successful in shifting the distribution of cattle to that lower valley. And then after we removed the low moisture block protein supplement, the cows again went back up to that upper valley. The third key to effective targeted grazing that we found is choosing the right time of day to herd cattle, and Retta kind of touched upon this briefly. But within a study conducted near Las Cruces, New Mexico, this represents 27 days in the late fall of 2011, and there's 42 head, 5 with GPS collars, and the red indicate the or when cattle were free roaming prior to the placement of low moisture block protein supplement and herding. The purple represent when supplement was placed here and cattle were herded to that supplement every other day. And the green represent where they went afterwards. And so that within this trial, we had relatively good success. Cattle spent about 45% of their time within the targeted grade plot when we were herding and providing supplement. And so that was about 10.6 hours per day. And during both pre and post control periods when they were free roaming, they spent very little time within the control or target plot, excuse me. However, we did see some interesting behavioral patterns that indicate the best time of day to herd cattle to these targeted plots. So this is the same 27-day period that was just shown in the figure before, starting in November 28th and ending December 24th. And this was our targeted grazing period here. So what the red bars represent is the distance to the study plot. So when the red bars go to 0, that's when this cow was within a study plot. And within the blue line goes to 0, that's when the distance, that was when the cow was at water. So what we found is that each of these notches is at 12 noon. And as you can see here, that on most of these days, right around between 11 and 3, or right around that 12 noon time, cattle were relatively close to water. And when we started herding on the 7th, we picked them up right around 1 o'clock. And we herded them to the targeted area. And they remained, this cow, and we saw this on a lot of the cows that we had collared, this cow remained near the targeted area or within the targeted area for 2 days, came back on the 9th. We came back out and herded on the 9th. We picked her up right around noon, pushed her back again. She came back 2 days later. We picked her up, pushed her again. And so it was very effective to go out between the hours of about 11 and 3. We tended to find these cows. We also saw what was kind of interesting is a lot of times we'd go out there and see those cows come to water, turn around, and go right back to the supplement without herding at all. So those are the times when we herded. And so when the cattle were free roaming, we found that the percentage of time at water was nearly 3 times greater during midday between the hours of 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. than earlier in the morning or in late afternoon. So they spent close to 35% of their time. If you were to go out during these times, you would more than likely find cattle located at water. And so if you are going to spend the time to go out and to move your cows to these targeted grazing areas, picking the most effective time when you're going to find cows there is an important component of making it effective. Other benefits to herding at midday include a greater likelihood of finding cattle at water. You do not disrupt the morning grazing bout. Cattle can get a drink before being herded to the targeted area, and this also makes it so cattle are less likely to turn around and come back to water shortly after you've herded them there. They've got their drink, and they're ready to start that afternoon grazing bout. And so this is generally different from a typical cattle working day. Anybody that's worked cows, generally this is what you see as you go out early in the morning, and generally that's necessary if you're working cows all day or if you're moving cattle long distances. But what we found for when you're targeting cattle grazing, your best bet is just to go ahead and sleep in and wait, and then come out around 11, 12, 1 o'clock when you're more likely to find cattle, and they're more likely to go to the target area, spend the night there, and again graze within the morning, or as we found in some cases, spend several days there at the targeted area. Lastly, and Retta touched on this briefly, is low-stress livestock handling. And defined, low-stress livestock handling is livestock-centered, behaviorally correct, psychologically oriented, ethical, and humane method of working livestock based on mutual communication and understanding. And this is kind of the overreaching definition of what low-stress livestock handling and low-stress herding is. And as was said, a lot of this is stuff worked from Bud Williams, working with cattle and not against them. And we found that this is an important component of making sure that your cattle are settled within the targeted area, and also as trains them in moving to that targeted area. What we found is that within this picture here, it kind of shows, but supplement was placed right here. And a lot of times what we'd find is that as you move cattle away from water, they would form trails, but as they got closer and closer, when you got within several hundred meters, their pace would actually pick up. Some would even start trotting along. And so after they knew where supplement at, it was fairly easy to move them to the supplement, and 1 to 2 herders could generally move the cattle with ease. And then once at supplement, they were settled, they would get to supplement. Most of the time they'd put their head down, start licking on the supplement, start grazing, and as we saw, they usually spent quite a bit of time there. So low stress herding, it's a matter of training cattle to give to pressure, being in the proper position. And also, I think the biggest thing about low stress livestock handling is having a positive attitude, and also looking at the problem being with the person rather than the cow or the animal. I've said that stupid cow more often than I care to admit, but I know that more often it's probably me than the cow. For more information on this, these are some good resources that can be found online if more people would like to learn more about low stress livestock handling. So in conclusion, targeted cattle grazing using low moisture block protein supplement and low stress herding provides a tool that range managers can use to accomplish ecosystem services and improve cattle distribution. And we found that some of the keys to effective targeted cattle grazing include placement of low moisture block protein supplement to help hold cattle within that targeted area or where you want them to graze. Grazing on dormant vegetation, which is probably the best time because there's a need for that protein. Cattle are going to want it, and you're probably going to be providing protein a lot of the time during this time anyway. Herding at midday we found to be the most effective in making the most benefit out of the time spent herding cattle, and also using low stress herding. With that, I'd like to acknowledge that this is a USD, funded by a USDA AFRI grant, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Mitch?
Yeah.